Hey there, folks! Today we're diving into a story that's making waves across the globe, and trust me, you'll want to pay attention. The world of international politics just got a little more complicated, and at the center of it all, Ukraine and China. Ukraine's making some big moves, and this time, they're taking aim at China. That's right, Kyiv isn't just watching from the sidelines anymore. They're stepping up and making their voice heard on the world stage, and their latest action is sending shockwaves through diplomatic circles. We're talking sanctions, the international equivalent of a strongly worded letter, except with actual consequences. Sanctions are like putting up a giant "Do Not Enter" sign for business, trade, and cooperation. They can freeze assets, block deals, and make life very difficult for the companies and countries on the receiving end. Ukraine just slapped sanctions on 3 Chinese companies, and let's just say, things are getting a little frosty between Kyiv and Beijing. These aren't just any companies. They're major players in the Chinese economy, and their involvement in the ongoing conflict has raised some serious eyebrows. So what's the deal? Why is Ukraine throwing down the sanctions gauntlet? Well, it all comes down to allegations that these Chinese companies have been supporting Russia's war effort, either by supplying technology, materials, or financial backing. Ukraine says enough is enough, and they're using every tool in their diplomatic toolbox to push back. Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because we're diving headfirst into a geopolitical pressure cooker. This isn't just about Ukraine and China, it's about the entire international community watching closely to see what happens next. Every move is being analyzed, every statement dissected, and the stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just about trade disputes or economic maneuvering. The ripple effects of these sanctions could impact global markets, shift alliances, and even influence how other countries respond to similar situations in the future. It's a high-stakes chess game, and every piece matters. It's about accusations of war, possible war crimes, and a whole lot of finger-pointing. As Ukraine calls out China for its alleged role in the conflict, the world is left to wonder, will these sanctions change the course of the war, or are we just seeing the beginning of a much bigger showdown on the global stage? Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. Let's get down to brass tacks, shall we? Today, we're diving into a story that's making waves in the world of international business and geopolitics. When countries impose sanctions, it's not just a matter of paperwork or political posturing. Real companies, real people, and real economies are affected. And in this case, Ukraine has drawn a very clear line in the sand. Ukraine has specifically targeted 3 Chinese companies: Beijing Aviation and Aerospace, Xianghui Technology Company Limited, Ruijin Machinery Company Limited, and Zhongfu Shenying Carbon Fiber Zinning Company Limited. These aren't just random names pulled out of a hat. Each of these companies plays a unique and important role in China's industrial and technological landscape, and their activities have caught the attention of Ukrainian authorities for reasons that go beyond simple trade. Now, we're not talking about brands you'd see on billboards or products you'd find in your local supermarket. These are industrial giants, operating in sectors like aerospace, advanced materials, and heavy machinery. They're the kind of companies that help power China's economic engine, supplying critical components and technology not just domestically, but to partners and clients around the world. Their influence stretches far beyond their factory walls. So what do these sanctions actually mean in practice? It's a question worth unpacking, because sanctions aren't just symbolic gestures, they have teeth. When a government like Ukraine decides to sanction foreign companies, it's making a statement, but it's also setting off a chain reaction of legal and financial consequences. For starters, any assets these companies might have in Ukraine, whether it's money in bank accounts, investments, or even physical property, are immediately frozen. That means they can't access their funds, move their money, or liquidate their holdings. It's like suddenly finding your wallet locked in a safe, with no way to get it open. Imagine waking up one morning to discover your bank account is frozen, your credit cards don't work, and you can't pay your employees or suppliers. That's the kind of disruption these companies are now facing. It's not just an inconvenience, it can bring business operations to a grinding halt, damage relationships with partners, and create a ripple effect throughout their supply chains. But the impact goes even further than just financial assets. These sanctions also mean that these companies are effectively shut out of the Ukrainian market. They can't sign new contracts, fulfill existing deals, or even maintain a physical presence in the country. Offices may be closed, employees let go, and business opportunities lost overnight. On top of that, Any ongoing business relationships with Ukrainian partners are now in jeopardy. Deals that were in the works are suddenly off the table, shipments are stopped at the border, meetings are canceled. It's a clear message. These companies are no longer welcome to operate, invest, or collaborate within Ukraine's borders. In essence, Ukraine is sending a strong signal to these companies, and to the world. By imposing these sanctions, Ukraine is saying, we're serious about protecting our interests, and we're not afraid to take bold action. The message is loud and clear. If you cross certain lines, you're simply not welcome here. To really get why Ukraine is turning up the heat with these economic moves, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. This isn't just about trade or tariffs. This is about a country fighting for its survival and using every tool in the toolbox, including economic pressure, to send a message to the world. And at the center of it all is Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine's president, who's become the face of Ukrainian resistance and resilience on the global stage. Zelensky isn't exactly known for mincing words. In fact, when it comes to calling out what he sees as international double-dealing, he's about as subtle as a Molotov cocktail in a library. He's been loud, clear, and relentless in his accusations, especially when it comes to China's role in the ongoing conflict. The heart of the matter, Zelensky and his administration are accusing China of sending weapons, ammunition, and other military supplies directly to Russia, supplies that could be fueling the very war that's tearing Ukraine apart. And Zelensky isn't just making noise for the sake of headlines. He's been deliberate, calculated, and, according to his team, he's got the receipts to back it all up. Ukrainian officials claim they've gathered solid intelligence, classified reports, intercepted communications, and satellite imagery that all point to a steady flow of military-grade materials making their way from China to Russia. This isn't just speculation. They say it's the kind of evidence that would make any intelligence agency sit up and take notice. Zelensky has gone public with these claims, pointing the finger directly at China in front of the world's media. He's accused Beijing of supplying not just gunpowder and artillery, but a whole range of military goodies, the kind of stuff that can tip the balance on the battlefield. We're talking about artillery shells, explosives, and specialized equipment, items that, if they really are coming from China, could be making a direct impact on the front lines in Ukraine. The implications are huge, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire international order. If these allegations are true, it's a massive violation of international norms, especially with a war raging in Europe. The world is watching, and the stakes couldn't be higher. For Ukraine, this isn't just about calling out a rival, it's about survival, justice, and making sure the world knows exactly who's fueling the fire. Of course, China's not exactly taking these accusations lying down. They've responded with a resounding, "Nope, not us." The Chinese government's been singing the diplomatic equivalent of "We are the world," claiming their only interest is in promoting peace talks and a ceasefire. Their official spokesperson, Lin Jian, has been adamant that China's hands are clean. They're pushing the narrative that they're neutral players in this whole conflict. But here's the thing, folks, actions speak louder than words. And in the court of international opinion, well, the jury's still out. Adding fuel to this already raging fire, Ukraine's released some pretty damning evidence. Videos of captured soldiers, claiming to be Chinese citizens, fighting alongside Russian forces. Zelensky even went so far as to say there are at least 155 Chinese citizens fighting for Russia. Now we've got to be careful here, folks. It's important to verify these claims, and we need to remember that things aren't always as they appear in the fog of war. But if true, this throws a whole new wrench into China's claims of neutrality. It's safe to say that relations between Ukraine and China are about as amicable as a pack of hyenas fighting over a gazelle carcass. These recent events have only widened the gap, creating a chasm of mistrust and animosity. Before the war, Ukraine and China had a relatively decent relationship, with trade and economic ties binding them together. But those bonds are starting to fray like a cheap suit. The sanctions, the accusations, the alleged Chinese fighters, it's a recipe for diplomatic disaster. This isn't just a regional spat, folks. This has global implications. We're talking about a potential escalation of an already volatile conflict, with the world's second-largest economy possibly taking sides. China's walking a tightrope here. They're trying to maintain their image as a responsible global player, while also seemingly supporting Russia, albeit in a hush-hush kind of way. This balancing act can't last forever. Sooner or later they'll have to pick a side, and the consequences will be felt worldwide. So, what does the future hold? Honestly, folks, it's murkier than a swamp after a rainstorm. The situation is fluid, ever-changing, and about as predictable as a toddler on a sugar rush. One thing's for sure, though. This is a diplomatic minefield, and one wrong step could have explosive consequences. It's a high-stakes game of poker, and the stakes just got even higher. Look, I'm not a diplomat, folks. I'm just a guy trying to make sense of this crazy world. But one thing's clear. We need dialogue, and we need it now. This war has gone on long enough, and the potential for things to spiral out of control is terrifying. Instead of sanctions and accusations, we need to be talking, negotiating, and finding a peaceful resolution. Because at the end of the day, war doesn't have winners, folks, only losers. And right now, the whole world is losing.